Okay, I think we're live.
We are. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being at this Q&A with our friend and director, Anthony Chen, about his wonderful movie, The Wet Season. If you haven't seen it yet, please watch it. We still have all day today to see it. And please follow us, stay with us. We're here to cater to all of you guys to show you beautiful movies, great movies, and this is one of them. And thank you, Anthony. I know you're in London. It's not really late. It's like what, 6 p.m., right?
Yeah, it's not late. That's fine.
It's 6 p.m. Good. It's 6 p.m., isn't it there now? Yes, it is.
Yeah, yes, that's right. I was worried that it's gonna be too early for you guys. It's a Sunday.
Yeah, that's well, these days, you know, we're all stuck at home. What do we have, to do? But anyway, so thank you so much for being here. Please, hopefully, when things gets normal, we would love to have you physically at the festival, which is the next one in November 2021. Rick, thank you. You take it from here.
Okay, thanks, George. Hi, Anthony. Great to meet you, and thanks for making the time to be with us today. So it's been quite the journey from Toronto to nominations at Golden Horse Awards to Yann actually winning Best Actress to now having your film as the official Oscar submission from Singapore, and actually the second time that one of your films has had that honor. So now it's been a year since you've been on the festival round, and it's been a couple of years since you've made the film. How are you still taking this all in on this journey?
I don't know. You know what? This year has been a very weird one. I'm sure it's been a very sort of surreal one for everyone. I think the fact that cinemas are closed, the fact that, it's so hard to get this film shown anywhere. I remember I was doing a week of publicity in France, and then the film opened in France in February, I think, and it played for 2 weeks, and then all cinemas had to close. In Malaysia, it played for 2 days. So I'm just really grateful that people are willing to, watch the film or get a chance to see the film, or the fact that, that opportunity to even talk about the film. I really cherish that, because it's just so hard to even get anyone to see anything these days.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I'm glad we're able to show it to people. So, your last film that really launched your career was Ilo Ilo with the Camera d'Or, and as I mentioned, it was a previous Oscar submission from Singapore, and it dealt with a mother-son relationship. This film deals with a teacher-student relationship, and obviously goes much further than that. And I know, I've heard that you weren't really planning on casting the same two actors again in this much more mature role. Give us the background on that, and how did that happen?
Yes, I wasn't planning to do that at all. So for what was interesting on Ilo Ilo, we basically did a very wide net casting process. We saw like 8,000 children. I was looking for a 10, 11-year-old. We went to 21 primary schools. We saw 8,000 of them. And, and I did, I think eventually we shortlisted 300 of them. They came into our workshops. And after 10, it was almost like a reality show, after 10 months, eventually I had, the eventual 10, and Ko Jiala, who is also in Wet Season, I discovered him in Ilo Ilo, was so special, and he stood out, and I casted him. He has never done anything, hasn't been in a play, hasn't acted before in his life. But he was really, really special. So on Wet Season, I thought the tough part would be casting the young kid as well. So I was looking for a 16-year-old, and I did the same thing. I went to lots of schools. We saw hundreds of kids. I ran a lot of workshops in Singapore, but I just couldn't find, like that fresh face that I did, like on Ilo Ilo. And one day, I was just randomly sort of like scrolling my Instagram, and I chanced upon this picture, and I was like, it was a picture that was posted by TV studio, one of the TV companies, and there was this boy that looked charismatic and he looked good on screen. I was thinking, oh great, like maybe let's bring him into the audition, let's bring him to workshops. And then I showed it to my producer then, and then the casting team, and they said, this is your actor. This is your actor from ELO, because he had grown up so much and I've not seen him in many years. He was literally 11 years old when I saw him, and it's been so many years and he has become a proper teenager now. So we brought him in. He did some workshops, but I was very surprised that he just sparkled. And he shined like a diamond. You don't expect that with child actors. With most child actors, they're casted because they feel like that character, and that's it. That is that one role of their life. So I was quite surprised that he had that same spark, that same talent, that same potential, and he blossomed. He really did. So I casted him, and because I casted him, my first feeling was, okay, I'm gonna cast the actress. But originally I did think of Yann as a possibility, but because I casted Kojala and they played mother and son in the last film, I was thinking like, oh gosh, this is incestuous, I'm not gonna do this. So I went about sort of spending a long time, I think about a year. We met with actors from television, from film, from stage, that it's a very small industry, Singapore and Malaysia. So really it's a handful of names in that age group that you're looking at. I met up with them, but there wasn't one that like I felt was right. So eventually I rang Yann up. I said, I don't think this role is for you, because it's so awkward trying to do this like with this boy, but maybe you should read the script, you should come in, let's just run some scenes and let's see. And that was what we did. So in a way, it wasn't a plan, but it became the plan. And yes, it was quite I would say an interesting process for us to do this, because we had that relationship on the first film, because of their relationship, that mother-son relationship that has sort of like gone on for a little bit, because it was his first screen role, and he was so used to calling him mommy that eventually, even down to the time when we're doing rehearsing and we're shooting, like the boy was calling her mommy all the time, and I was saying like, I can't do this. Like by the time we got to like day 2, I told Chala, I said, you're not allowed to call her mommy anymore. Like, let's be professional about this. It's going to be really difficult for us to get into like this film. And that was it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, the performances are amazing. You wouldn't know about all that backstory if you weren't aware of it. So, I mean, they're both so incredibly convincing. And, the character of Ling, especially, she's this woman that has all these obligations, and she's repressed, but she's dutiful. And the way you tell the film, and kind of the slow build, the tension surfaces, and every scene we see, whether she's having to deal with her father-in-law or her husband, or the fact that her school doesn't take her seriously, you feel something's going to happen, and eventually it does. So it really builds in a fantastic way. And it seems like you took your time with every scene, and every scene kind of tells its own nuanced story. I mean, you wrote the script, you're the producer, and you're the director. So
yeah.
You had the overview of the entire film. Tell us, how did you get, Yann Yo to do this on her own? She's in every scene, and she really carries the film.
To be really honest, it was really tough on her. It was tough for me as well. I think because she's never, I think it's very rare, right? There are sort of like character-driven films, but it's really rare usually when you have a film where an actor is in literally every single scene. And it's really tough for an actor, because for her, she would be the first on set. Most people don't know this, but because she has very short hair, she has very short crop hair. probably slightly longer than like my hair. So she was wearing a wig throughout the film. So, there was a lot of hair and makeup time at the start of the day. So she was the first one to start the day, and she was the last one to end the day as well. And this was going on for like the 40 days when we were shooting. And it's quite tough because most of the times, when you look at call sheets, you've got an actor that comes in, oh, I've got a break between this time and that time, I'm just waiting, But for her, she was just, and yet it's a role that is, yes, it's sort of restrained and nuanced, but emotionally there's so much to take on, and it's just so difficult that you just go like into back-to-back scenes where you have to give so much as an actress. And I think it was really tough for her. And then I think what was really tough especially was this character was a complete opposite of what she is in real life. If you have seen my first film, Ilo Ilo, that probably is a closer to her real personality. She's sort of like, she's really loud, she's quite bombastic a person, she's fun, she's adventurous, she's a bit of a wildfire. She's literally the polar opposite of what Ling is, which is, sort of gentle, and even in her mannerisms. So she had to basically unlearn, like basically throw herself away and sort of unlearn what she is and morph into Ling. And then, readjusting how she spoke, how she breathes, how she walked, because Yann doesn't walk in that gentle way. It's like bum 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 bum, like, because she grew up in a village, climbing trees and all that. So like you what you have is a man inside, but it took time. It took rehearsals. It took time to slowly build it. And what was interesting is, I think there's a lot of strength in her, as a person, as an actress, and basically it was really about harnessing that strength, but putting it all inside and not playing it outside. I think that's very much what Ling is for me. There's that strong sense of resilience. Because a lot of people go like, oh, why is she doing this? She could just go off, divorce her husband, lead her own life. But actually, it probably takes more courage and strength. And self-belief that maybe I can save my marriage, and maybe I can make this work out to stay on.
Well, it was interesting, after the affair, how, Waylon and Ling end things differently. I mean, it's the typical teenage crush versus the older woman who knows she needs to end it. And yeah. Those scenes must have been tough to direct, given the character's previous roles.
Yeah, it was really tough, but in a way it helped in a certain way, because I feel like most of my films are always about these complex relationships, and it's always about what I call constructed families, constructed sort of family bonds. In my first film, it was a Filipino live-in mate and a little boy, where she was almost like a surrogate mother, where a stranger sort of becomes a mother to a child. And then in this one, it's the same thing, they are sort of teacher and student, but what is that relationship really? Is he the replacement son of, like that she has always wanted? Or is he the replacement husband that has been absent from her life for the past few years? Or for him, is he sort of like a surrogate mother of some sort? Is it really romantic or something else? But so in a way, when we talk about the heartbreak, I personally, I feel like the person that really has had his heart broken, it's the boy, it's Waylon. He's experiencing sort of like falling in love with the first time, or having that sort of, close relations and that intimacy with someone that's sort of warm. But in the perspective of Ling, I think what she is like, she knows that I don't think it's been romantic for her from the start, but yet she sort of yearns this warmth and comfort and care from, whether it's a society, a school, a family that doesn't give you that, like she gets it from him. And sometimes that's what we need, like we need that sort of human warmth. So it's very complex. I feel like I'm always constantly exploring these very complex relationships, and how do you even label or how do you define these relationships? And is this a mother-son relationship? Is this a very deep sort of like friendship, or is this romantic in nature? Because I like to think it's really a sum of all those things.
Mhm. And the title of the film is Wet Season. Obviously, rain is in every scene until the very last scene.
Yeah.
So what's the metaphor here?
I for two reasons really. Like I've always wanted to incorporate the weather into my films. But growing up in Singapore, and Singapore has always been, it's sitting on the equator. It's a tropical country. It basically has no seasons, so the weather doesn't change. The only time the weather changes in Singapore, it's towards the end of the year, sometimes towards the start of the year. It changes because of climate change and all that, where there is a monsoon and it rains. Like usually in a tropical country you might have sort of short showers in the afternoon, but during the monsoon it can rain for hours, and it's really heavy pelting rain. And I always find that's very poetic, but at the same time I think it captures the emotional landscape of Ling's journey, of what's going through, what she's going through. At the same time, I like to think, it also perhaps aptly describes, how I view my own country, Singapore. I've seen, growing up in Singapore, it's become a very modern country. It's become very prosperous. It's, one of the most affluent countries. Yes, in spite of its size, if you look at GDP and all of those things like in the world, but somehow society has grown colder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And which is why, if you look at the film, like Singapore is shrouded in rain, scene to scene, back to back, and the only time you get sunshine, it's not in Singapore, it's when she's returned home to Malaysia.
Right. I mean, I think, there is a lot of clearly social commentary going on in the background here about Singapore, and there's no accident that she comes from Malaysia and is teaching Mandarin in Singapore, which doesn't seem to be very appreciated in the school, certainly not by the students and even by the school administration. And in your other film, Ilo Ilo, you had the Filipina character. So you have these characters that kind of come in from the outside into Singapore proper, the Singapore that we see in the West, and struggle to make their way there.
Yeah. That's
I mean, you're from Singapore, but you live in London. Are you planning on going back to Singapore, or will you continue to make films about Singapore from London, or are you looking now to make films that maybe don't have that much to do with Singapore?
Well, I have one more film to make in Singapore at least. I have to say, it's really tough trying to make a film in Singapore, because it's a very small population. You're looking at, when I was growing up, it was about 2 million people. Now we are about 5 million. But out of the 5 million, the sort of like about 2 million are sort of like migrant workers, transient workers, expats, which means it's a very small domestic market. But because Singapore is a very expensive city, the cost of filmmaking is very high. So it's so hard to sort of like make it justifiable or sort of make it sustainable. But I grew up in Singapore. I still have stories I want to tell about Singapore. I hope to continue making films in Singapore. There is at least one more film I would make in Singapore, and it's actually connected to the two films that we talk about, because I worked with Yann and Kojala on the first film, Ilo Ilo, right, when he was literally 11, and then I shot him when he was 17, and I'm gonna make another film again when he's 21. It's officially gonna be my growing up trilogy. So Ilo Wet Season, and then there is a coming of age of a boy, sort of a boy having to deal with adulthood, sort of coming out into society. And I'm not going to reveal too much, but I'm hoping that in 2 years' time, there would be the third part of this trilogy that I'm making. Yes, I do live in London. There are a few, there are other film and television projects I've been developing over the past couple of years in the English language. And hopefully that, hopefully the pandemic sort of passes really quickly, because, there would be a film that would ideally go into production next year, and it would be, my first English language film.
So, you mentioned Singapore as a small market, if you will. Since you're also the producer of this film, I know the Singapore Film Commission helped, the Taiwan Film Commission helped. I don't know if it's an official co-production Singapore-Taiwan, but how did you put the financing together?
The financing, it's relatively simple. But at the same time, yes, because Singapore, it's it's not a cheap country, so it's not like we did it for no budget, which is why it was important that we had to bring in money from other sources outside of Singapore. Taiwan, there was money from the Taipei Film Commission. It's not a grant; it's an investment. The Taipei Film Commission announced its sort of first round, the first ever sort of film investment fund that they're doing, and we applied and we got it. It's not a huge amount, but every little bit helps, and then there's financing from China as well. Mm-hmm. It's not official Chinese co-production, because I didn't want to open myself to censorship and the pains of getting a script pass and all of those things. But I was very thankful, I think, with my first film, Ilo Ilo, because it won a prize in Cannes, it won a lot of awards, and it did really well at the Golden Horse Awards, which is seen as the Oscars for Chinese-speaking films. And because of that, in the Chinese-speaking world, people started to know of me and my work, and it was easier to sort of raise money outside of Singapore, even though it's, as you could see in the film, it's still very much set against that Singapore-Malaysia landscape. So it wasn't like, oh, because of that, because I've never believed that I could cast a Taiwanese actress to play Ling. I've never believed that I could cast, a mainland Chinese actress to play her. I just, even if they would spend like a year sort of like learning the accents and all that, it's just so different. I just can't see that happening at all. But we have a lot of sort of crew, so it was from outside of Singapore. So there was a lot of crew from Malaysia that work on the film. Yann herself, even though she has lived in Singapore for a long time, she's Malaysian. The DP is British. He was a year above me, 2 years above me, I think, like at film school when I was doing film school here. And then we have the entire sound team in Taiwan, and the sound post was done in Taiwan. I have a feeling that a lot of what we know as independent films or art house films or foreign language films are going to take more and more the form of co-productions these days, especially when theatrical gets even more and more challenging.
Right. Yeah. And it seems like audiences around the world are much more open to watching foreign films now, thanks to the streamers in large part, and also watching films in foreign languages and with subtitles and so forth. So I would think, you know, your film gets seen by a much wider audience at the end than it would be if it was just theatrical. Um, so do you think, you know, this is a question that keeps coming up now with Parasite having done so well last year. Does that make you hopeful as an Asian filmmaker? Do you think, you know, I mean, Korea has kind of been at the forefront for some time now, but does it make you hopeful, you know, that Southeast Asian films will have a better shot at breaking through right now, and also perhaps be recognized more by the Academy here and you know, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association?
I'm not sure. You know, I think everyone across Asia, especially the Koreans, right, was incredibly sort of pleased when Parasite scored that massive success. You know, like during award season and at Oscars. You know, it was almost like Asia won the World Cup.
Right.
But I almost feel like it's an anomaly, and I have to say that it's such an entertaining film. You know, yes, it's done with a single-minded sort of auteur vision, but you know, it's actually really commercial and entertaining. You know, I think it's perhaps more entertaining than some mainstream sort of Hollywood films that we are seeing, you know, out there in the market these days. So I think because of that, you know, which is what people respond to, unfortunately, you know, I think it really helps with audiences sort of opening their possibilities of foreign language. But you know, it always happens once every decade or something like that. Before Parasite, we had Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? Where all of a sudden, you know, like it was creating sort of records, you know, on both sides of the pond in America and the UK. You know, it was hitting like huge box office numbers, but it didn't translate into, oh, the next year all of a sudden Asian product just soared. So in a way, I think it has to do with the film itself, and we have to still, you know, remember that a lot of Asian content or even Southeast Asian content, you know, it's of a different pace. It's, you know, especially if it's more art housey in nature. You know, for example, you know, Wet Season, you know, I think it's a moving film, but it's a slow burner. You know, it doesn't play at that sort of pace. I think it gives hope to everyone, but you know, I think we can't just take it for granted, you know, like, oh, it's just opened the door for everything else. In the end, it's down to the film.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, you're a real ambassador for Singapore. You know, you really are trying to push that culture and get your country's films on, you know, more noticed. So that's great. I mean, obviously, since they've submitted 2 of your films now to the Oscars here in the United States, I think that's fantastic. Do you have any aspirations of coming to Hollywood at some point, or is that not so much on the radar right now?
Well, I've you know, I do dip in and out of LA from time to time for meetings because I'm rec by, you know, an agent, you know, like in LA as well at UTA, you know. So I'm in development on different projects over the years. Yeah, I would, in the end, it's down to story. You know, eventually, like the films that I decide to embark on, are films where its subject matter or its story or its characters sort of like move me in a really deeper way. You know, I almost feel like I can't make a film where you know, either the script or the story doesn't personally touch me. If it doesn't move me personally, I'm not sure how I can move audiences. So it really needs to be that, hopefully at some point. But in fact, what's interesting is I was literally in LA like that week before the US closed its borders. You know, like before like the world changed completely. I was literally in LA. I got out of a flight 2 days before the borders closed.
Well, I'd like to bring in George now. I think he has a question for you, Anthony.
Yeah, actually, a simple question. But before I ask the question, I want to go back to the way Oh God, what was I going to say? Sorry, let me just go back 1 second because I wrote it down. Yeah, the way Yann played her role in this movie was just amazing. There was like this crescendo. And it's not a question, it's just a remark that I'm doing. It was really impressive from going from where she was to where she ends. It was just incredible. I mean, this shows the depth of this lady when she took on this part. And I understand that she worked very, very hard on her role in this movie. So anyway, what I wanted to ask is, I just saw you thanked Ian Seller, the writer-director. How come?
How come? Because he is my teacher at film school, from many years ago. I went to film school twice. I went to 3-year film school in Singapore, and then later on I did my master's at the National Film and Television School. And he teaches there. And yeah, he taught me at film school. He has been very helpful, like on both my feature films, after I left film school, like he's one of those tutors that I trust completely, where I would show him the script, in between sort of drafts, and I would show him, like the cuts, before I were to picture lock, and he's been incredibly generous and useful in that way. Like Ian Seller taught me at school. The other tutor that I did thank in my credits that was really helpful when I was cutting the film this time was Pavel Pawlikowski, because he taught me at school as well, and he's so sharp when it comes to editing. So I always make sure that I send him, I'll write him an email and say, I'm gonna picture lock soon, you should try and look at it, is it working for you? I feel like there are certain people in your life who you trust the taste of, and that they will always speak the honest truth to you, and I keep them close to my side, because I'm very aware that as a director, sometimes you would be blindsided, and sometimes you might be just overindulgent. You might be overly in love with your own story, your own script, your characters, that you're blindsided in a certain way, and I'm very thankful that I've there are friends and mentors out there that would always sort of like afford that time, to look at my work.
That's good. Okay. Any questions? Do we have any questions?
Anything else you want to add, George, or?
No, I just wanted to, when we wrap up, of course, I just want to thank, of course, Anthony for being there, and very interesting Q&A. And I mean, I love the movie. Personally, I'm a champion of this movie, and I'm glad that it is part of our Asian World Film Festival, official movies. And of course, I would like to thank for Asia Society Southern California for their support and their partnership. And Anthony, thank you. And again, consider AWFF your home, and hopefully we will see you physically here in LA during the festival.
Yeah, and we look forward to the third film in the trilogy.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. I've been writing that script all through lockdown.
Well, this is the great thing about the lockdown. You don't have much to do, right?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think this year, as much as everyone has been so disappointed, and it feels so gloomy, but in a way, it's been very productive, on the development and writing side. So I have a feeling, not just for myself, but for most filmmakers out there, like the next few years, you're gonna see a lot of very special projects come out, because they're all sort of like being worked out and developed, during the very difficult time of the pandemic.
Yeah. When you write, do you I know I have many friends. I'm a film director. That's my job also. And I know that when I write, I need to have a lot of noise around me. I'm not the kind of person who, blocks myself from everything that's going on outside. What about you? Do you stay in London, or are you outside London when you're writing your screenplay? What do you do?
You know what, I write best when it's very noisy, like you. Sometimes I can be very productive in a cafe when like there's just lots of chatter and lots of stuff going on. In fact, a lot of people are saying, oh, like do a writer's retreat, go into the mountains, find a lake or something. I've tried that before. I've literally, like check myself into a hotel with a sea view and stayed there for 3 days, and I didn't write a single word.
This reminds me of Sidney Pollack, of course, that you know. Sidney, God rest his soul, he used to, he would tell me, I asked him that same question. And I did not know, because I used to live in Paris in those days. So when I came here, and we used to see each other a lot, and I remember he would disappear for days on, and no telephone, nothing. And I would ask him, where do you go? What do you do? He said, well, I don't go very, very far. I go to Malibu. I have a little house there. I just lock myself, and that's where I write my screenplays. So, it's funny that you and we're more into, I love being in a coffee shop, because the buzz, and you hear so many words coming out of people and stories, it does help me personally to create, even though I'm not really a writer as per se. I always work with a writer. But I need this noise. I need the people around me.
Well, you have your 2-year-old Anthony, right? As background.
Yeah, I've got a 2-year-old, and which made it really hard. Like I think there was, when we entered a lockdown in March for 2 months, it was impossible to do anything, because my wife is, has a proper sort of day job in finance. She's sort of like working behind the desk, and it was just me caring for a child, and it was so hard. But I feel I work best when I love talking to people. I love bouncing ideas, and sometimes like just random talk with someone might spur up other ideas for a scene that I'm writing, or or bring me somewhere like, oh, I've cracked the ending, I know where we're gonna go now. I find that incredibly useful.
Great. It was really wonderful to speak with you, Anthony. And on behalf of the Asian World Film Festival and the Asian Society of Southern California, thanks so much for making the time on a Sunday evening, and hope to see you here in LA soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Rick, and thanks, George.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you. Stay safe.
You too. Stay safe.